The base sat in a wide stretch of dust and sun, quiet in the way that never really meant quiet. Engines hummed in the distance. Radios clicked on and off. Boots scraped over gravel. The day looked ordinary, and that was the point. Ordinary days kept people alive. She moved through the storage tent with a clipboard tucked against her chest. Boxes were stacked in clean rows. Labels faced out. Counts were neat. She checked numbers, marked them down, and nodded once to herself. To anyone watching, she looked like she belonged right where she was another person keeping. Things moving from behind the scenes. Most people did not look twice at her. They saw the role first. Supply clerk. Paperwork. Logistics. A job that mattered, but not one that drew attention. She kept her head down and her voice low. When someone asked a question, she answered with short, clear words. When someone joked, she smiled just enough. The unit had been here for weeks, long enough for routines to form, long enough for people to decide who was who. Fighters trained at the range. Medics ran drills. Drivers worked on vehicles under the hard sun, and she counted supplies, checked manifests, and helped load crates. Still, there were small things that did not fit the picture. When a helicopter passed overhead, she paused and tracked it without lifting her chin. When a sudden bang echoed from the far side of the base, she did not flinch. Her hand stayed steady as she wrote. Her breathing never changed. A few soldiers noticed these things but brushed them off. People reacted differently to stress, they told themselves. Some went quiet. Some stayed calm. It meant nothing. Later that morning, word spread about a convoy. A short run. Basic resupply to an outpost down a narrow stretch of road. It had been done before. The route was familiar. Intelligence reports said the area was calm. Calm was a word people used when they wanted to believe. In the motor pool, drivers checked tires and engines. Gunners cleaned mounts. A few people argued about seating and order. She arrived with paperwork and walked the line, ticking off boxes as each vehicle was cleared. When she reached the lead truck, she paused. She listened, not with her ears alone, with her whole body. The wind shifted. Dust moved in a thin line across the ground. Somewhere beyond the fence, a dog barked and then went silent. She felt a familiar tightening in her chest, like a door closing. She marked the page and stepped back. One of the soldiers cracked a joke about paperwork saving the day. Another laughed and said, at least the supply clerk would stay safe at the base. A few smiles followed. She did not react. She simply finished her checks and handed the clipboard over. Orders were read out. Times confirmed. The convoy would roll after midday, when the heat pressed down hard and shadows grew short. Less movement then. Less chance of trouble, they said. She returned to the tent and began packing smaller items into crates. Medical kits. Water filters. Batteries. Her hands moved fast, but nothing looked rushed. Every item went in the right place. Every seal was checked twice. Someone asked if she was nervous. She looked up, met the question with calm eyes, and said no. Just focused. That answer ended the conversation. As the sun climbed, the base took on that slow, heavy feeling. Sweat soaked into fabric. Dust clung to skin. People drank water and waited. Radios hummed with low chatter. A watch changed at the gate. She stepped outside and scanned the horizon. The land stretched flat and open, broken by low ridges and dry paths that cut through the earth. Roads here were not lines. They were guesses. A memory tried to surface then, but she pushed it down. There would be time later. The convoy lined up. Engines roared to life one by one. She climbed into the rear seat of a vehicle near the middle. Not the safest spot. Not the most dangerous either. It was a place someone like her would be told to sit. As the gate opened, she adjusted her seatbelt and rested her hands on her knees. Her posture was relaxed but not loose. Her eyes moved, catching reflections in mirrors, counting gaps between vehicles. The road beyond the base narrowed quickly. Concrete gave way to dirt. Buildings thinned out and then disappeared. The convoy stretched into a long, slow line. Dust rose behind them and hung in the air. Heat pressed down like a weight. The radio crackled with updates that said nothing had changed. She watched the roadside. A pile of rocks that had not been there last time. A stretch of ground where plants looked too clean. A bend that forced the lead vehicle to slow. Her jaw tightened. She leaned forward slightly as if to get more comfortable. Anyone watching would have thought nothing of it. But her breathing slowed. Her focus sharpened. The vehicle rolled on. In the lead truck, someone talked about dinner plans. In another, a song played low on the radio. Life kept moving, even on roads like this. She glanced at the driver's reflection, and then at the gun mount above. She checked the straps on the door without looking down. The convoy reached the narrowest point of the route. High ground on one side, a dry channel on the other. The kind of place maps warned about but orders ignored. Her foot pressed lightly against the floor. She felt it before she heard it. A shift in the air. A pause that lasted half a breath too long. The moment stretched, she did not move. Not yet. Somewhere ahead a sound began to rise, sharp and sudden. Like the world pulling back before a strike, and still. To everyone else, she was just the supply clerk. Sitting quietly in the back seat, clipboard long set aside, waiting for a day that was supposed to be easy, the sound hit first. A sharp crack that cut through the air and broke the calm like glass. The lead vehicle jerked to the side as dirt burst upward near its front tire. For half a second, no one understood what was happening. Then the world erupted. The ground shook. A blast rolled through the convoy, throwing dust and heat in every direction. The second vehicle slammed its brakes. Metal screamed. Shouts filled the air, loud and confused. She was already moving before anyone yelled for orders. She leaned forward and grabbed the door handle. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes were alive now, sharp and locked on the road ahead. She listened through the chaos, separating sounds the way others separated colors. Another blast hit farther down the line. Not close enough to flip a vehicle, but close enough to send a warning. This was not random. This was planned. The convoy stopped in pieces. Some vehicles blocked the road. Others were caught in the open. Dust rolled so thick it blurred shapes and distance. The radio crackled with overlapping voices, none of them clear. Someone shouted for everyone to stay inside. Someone else shouted that the lead truck was hit. A third voice tried to call command, but only static answered. She stayed seated, but her body shifted. Her feet found balance. Her hands moved to places they knew by memory. Gunfire started next. Short bursts from high ground. Not wild, controlled. The kind meant to pin people down and force mistakes. A round struck the side of the vehicle with a hard thud. The driver swore and ducked low. The gunner above tried to line up a response. But dust made targets hard to see. In the back seat, the supply clerk did not scream. She did not freeze. She counted 3 shots from the left. A pause. 2 more from farther back. She pictured positions without seeing them. Her jaw set. Another explosion echoed behind them. A vehicle radio went dead. This was no longer a simple resupply run. The door beside her flew open as someone jumped out, trying to drag a wounded soldier toward cover. More shots cracked overhead. The air smelled like dirt and burned fuel. She leaned out just enough to see the road. The lead truck was disabled. Smoke pouring from its front. A second vehicle sat at an angle, blocking the narrow path. The convoy was trapped. She slid out of her seat and dropped low, moving with the rhythm of the chaos rather than fighting it. Her movements were quick but smooth, never rushed. She kept close to the vehicle, using it as cover. To anyone watching, she still looked like she didn't belong here. No markings. No special gear. Just a person caught in the wrong place. But the way she moved told a different story. A wounded soldier lay near the rear tire, clutching an arm and breathing fast. She reached him without hesitation, checked the wound in one glance, and tightened a band with firm hands. "Stay down," she said, her voice low and steady. Not a shout, a command. He nodded without thinking. More gunfire echoed. The sound came from higher ground now. They were being boxed in. She crawled back toward the open door and grabbed a radio handset. Static hissed, but she caught fragments. Someone calling for support. Someone else saying they were pinned. She pressed the button and spoke clearly, cutting through the noise. Hold positions. Do not push forward. Watch the ridge. There was a pause. Then someone answered, surprised but grateful to hear a calm voice. The vehicle shook as another round struck nearby. Dust rained down. She ducked and shifted, eyes scanning. She saw it then. A shape moving where it shouldn't. Too smooth. Too deliberate. She tracked it and waited. A soldier nearby fired without aim. The shots went wide. Wait, she said. Don't waste it. The soldier stared at her, confused. Who was she to say that? Before he could ask, the shape appeared again. She pointed. One clean burst followed. The movement stopped. The soldier's eyes widened. More shots came from the far side now, trying to draw attention away. The attackers were adjusting. They expected panic. They did not expect control. She moved back toward the vehicle, signaling for people to stay low. Her hand gestures were small but clear. People followed them without realizing why. The radio crackled again. Command was still out. No clear orders were coming. She felt the weight of that silence. This was the moment where things broke or held. She checked the road once more. The disabled vehicles, the narrow space. The high ground. Her mind worked fast, pulling old lessons to the surface. Another blast hit closer this time. The shockwave slapped the side of the truck. Someone cried out. She turned toward the sound. Already moving? The supply clerk was no longer just reacting. She was choosing, and somewhere on the ridge, unseen eyes were watching her now. Confused by the way the convoy had not fallen apart. They had planned for fear. They had not planned for her. The dust had not settled. But something else had changed. The noise was still there, shots echoing, engines idling, radios crackling, but the panic was fading. People were no longer shouting over one another. They were listening. She felt it too. The moment had arrived. The one where waiting caused more danger than acting. She leaned into the vehicle and reached for a piece of gear she was never supposed to touch. Her movement was calm, practiced. No hesitation. No glance around to see who was watching. She already knew when she stood again. She looked different. Not because of what she wore, but because of how she carried herself. Her shoulders were set. Her eyes were steady. The air around her seemed tighter, like everything nearby had been pulled into focus. Someone stared at her and asked who she was supposed to be. She didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed toward the ridge. 2 fingers, then a closed fist. The signal was clean and exact. A few people understood it right away. Others followed without knowing why. Bodies shifted into better positions. Weapons angled higher. The convoy stopped bleeding chaos and started breathing control. She moved forward, low and fast, using shadows and metal for cover. Each step had purpose. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was shaping the moment. A figure appeared on the ridge again, just a shape against the sky. She tracked it, waited for the smallest mistake, and acted. The threat dropped out of sight. There was no celebration. No shout. She was already moving on. Someone called her out again, louder this time, demanding to know who was giving orders. She finally looked back. Her voice was firm, even, and clear. Do exactly what I say, and we all get out of this. There was something in her tone that cut through doubt. Not anger, not fear, certainty. No one argued. She directed to people to secure the rear, then shifted focus forward. She marked angles, gaps, blind spots. Her words were short and precise. Every instruction had a reason. As she worked, pieces of her past surfaced not as memories but as instincts. Cold water. Endless drills. Long nights where mistakes were not forgiven. Lessons burned into muscle and bone. She had learned long ago that control was quieter than force. A radio came back to life with a burst of sound. Someone finally broke through to command. They asked for a situation. Report. She took the handset. Her report was clean, location, condition, threat direction, needs no extra words. The voice on the other end paused before responding. Copy, it said. The tone shifted. Respect had entered the line. She handed the radio back and returned her attention to the ridge. Movement had slowed there. The attackers were confused now. They were cautious. They had noticed her. She could feel it. Another attempt came from the opposite side, quieter this time. She spotted it before anyone else did and redirected attention without raising her voice. The response was quick. The threat faded. Minutes passed. Long minutes that felt like hours. The convoy held. People glanced at her when they thought she wasn't looking. They were trying to fit what they were seeing into what they thought they knew. It didn't work. One person finally asked how she knew what to do. She didn't explain. She didn't need to, but something in her eyes told a story older than this road, older than this mission. A story shaped by places that never appeared on maps. The fire from the ridge stopped completely. Silence crept back in, slow and uncertain. She didn't relax. Stay sharp, she said. This isn't over yet. Her words proved true when movement appeared farther out, retreating but watching. The danger was pulling back, not gone. Support finally arrived, vehicles pushing in from the rear with purpose and speed. The road began to open again. As the immediate threat passed, the weight of what had happened settled over the group. People exhaled. Hands shook. Someone laughed once, sharp and short, then stopped. She stepped back, letting others take over visible control. Her job was done here. A senior figure approached her. Eyes narrowed with questions that went beyond rank or role. You're not logistics, the person said. Quietly, she met the gaze and nodded once. That's all you need to know, she replied. There was no badge shown, no explanation offered, just truth. Given in the smallest amount required, as vehicles were cleared and the convoy prepared to move again. She returned borrowed gear and wiped dust from her hands. Her posture softened. Her presence faded back into the background, to anyone watching now. She could almost pass as invisible again, but the people who had been there would never forget. They had seen what she really was, and somewhere far beyond the road, the ones who planned the ambush were already carrying a different lesson with them. Some people are dangerous not because they look strong, but because they are ready when it matters most. The road did not feel the same anymore. It was still narrow, still lined with dust and broken ground, but the fear that once filled it had changed shape. It was quieter now, heavier. Like everyone understood how close things had come. She stood near the side of the vehicle, eyes moving without pause. The support convoy had arrived, but danger did not disappear just because help showed up. She knew that better than most. People waited for instructions. Not loudly, not openly. They watched her hands, her posture, the way she scanned the land. They followed her lead without asking why. She raised one hand and motioned for spacing. Vehicles adjusted their positions, creating room to move without crowding. She directed two people to check the disabled truck while others kept watch. Her voice stayed calm, even when stress pressed hard. No one questioned her. A wounded soldier was lifted carefully and moved to shade. She knelt beside them, checking breathing and pressure, offering steady words that grounded more than they comforted. "You're okay," she said. "Stay with me." The words mattered. Dust drifted across the road as time stretched on. Radios now worked better, passing updates in short, clear bursts. The area was not fully clear. The immediate threat had pulled back. She did not mistake that for safety. She walked the length of the convoy, checking positions, making eye contact where it counted. People straightened when she passed, not out of fear. Out of trust at the front, the lead vehicle was beyond repair. Smoke still curled from the engine, thin and gray. She studied it, then the road ahead, then the ground beside it. "This stays," she said. "We go around." Someone started to object, then stopped. The alternative route was rough, barely a path at all. But she had already judged it. Guided by her signals, vehicles shifted one by one, moving slow and careful. Tires gripped dirt and rock. Engines strained. No one rushed. She watched the high ground as they moved, tracking shadows, watching for movement. Her focus never slipped. Minutes passed. Then more. Nothing happened. Only when the last vehicle cleared, the danger zone did. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The convoy regrouped farther down the road. Where the land opened and sight lines improved, the sun was lower now, heat easing just enough to notice. People finally spoke about what had happened. Quiet voices. Short sentences. No one laughed. A few looked at her like they wanted answers. She gave none, instead. She returned to the role everyone recognized. She helped secure supplies, checked straps, and updated counts. Clipboard back in hand. Head slightly down, but things were different now. When she spoke, people listened harder. When she moved, eyes followed. Someone asked if she would ride up front this time. She shook her head. Middle is fine. It's no explanation. As the convoy resumed, the road stretched ahead, still uncertain, but no longer uncontested. Radios stayed active. Watchful eyes stayed alert. She sat back in her seat, hands resting easy, gaze steady. Across the line of vehicles, soldiers replayed moments in their minds. The way she moved, the way she spoke, the way fear had loosened its grip when she took control. They understood now that labels could lie. The outpost came into view as the light shifted toward evening. Low buildings, fences, a familiar shape against the horizon. The convoy rolled in without incident, engines shut down, dust settled. People climbed out slowly, the weight of the day finally catching up. Medics took over care. Reports began. Questions were asked. She stepped aside. A senior officer approached, expression thoughtful, measured, not angry, not curious, respectful. You didn't have to do that, the officer said quietly. She looked at the ground, then back up. Yes, she replied. I did. That was all. There were no further questions. As night came on, the base settled into a different rhythm. Lights flickered on. The smell of food drifted through the air. People spoke in low tones about close calls and narrow chances. She sat alone for a moment, cleaning dust from her boots. Her movements were slow now, deliberate, like she was letting the day drain out of her. For her, this was not new. But it was never easy. Somewhere beyond the wire, the road lay quiet again. The ambush site already fading back into the land, leaving only marks that time would erase. She knew reports would be written. Details trimmed. Truth reduced to what was allowed. And she was fine with that. Before turning in. She returned the clipboard to its place and checked tomorrow's schedule. Another routine day. Another ordinary task. She walked back into the shadows. Once again, just a supply clerk to anyone who did not know. Better, but those who had been there understood something now. The day had not been saved by luck. It had been saved by someone who stepped forward when it mattered, then quietly stepped back. Again, morning came slowly at the base. The kind of morning that followed a long night. The air was cooler, almost kind, and the dust had settled just enough to pretend nothing had happened. People moved with quieter steps. Voices stayed low. Eyes lingered longer than usual. She woke before the sun, as she always did. There was no alarm. There never was. She sat up on her bunk, took a steady breath, and let the day begin without hurry. Outside, a generator hummed. Somewhere, a door closed softly. She pulled on her boots and stepped into the open air. The base looked the same. Barriers in place. Flags still. Vehicles parked in rows, but the feeling had shifted. The kind of shift that came after something went wrong and then right again. At the small dining area, people nodded at her as she passed. Not the quick, polite nods from before. These were slower, more deliberate. She returned each one without stopping. After eating, she went straight to the storage tent. Crates waited to be logged. Supplies needed sorting. Routine demanded attention. She welcomed that. Her hands moved over boxes and labels, checking numbers, sealing tape, adjusting stacks. The work grounded her. It always had. A pair of soldiers entered, speaking in low voices. They fell quiet when they noticed her, then continued anyway. "Never seen anything like that," one said. "Didn't even hesitate," the other replied. She kept working. Later, a report was read aloud at a briefing. Words were careful, clean. What happened was reduced to lines on paper. An ambush attempt. Quick response. Minimal losses. Mission completed. Her role was not mentioned. She expected nothing else. After the briefing, someone caught up to her outside, hesitated, then spoke. "Just wanted to say thanks," the person said. She looked at them, really looked this time, and nodded once. "You did good out there," she replied. The words landed heavier than praise as the day went on. Training resumed. Radios buzzed. A convoy prepared for another run, different route, same risks. She was not assigned to it. Instead, she stayed behind, managing supplies, updating logs, moving unseen through familiar spaces. If anyone questioned it, they kept the thought to themselves. In the afternoon, she found a quiet spot near the edge of the base. From there, the land stretched wide and empty, the road barely visible in the distance. She stood still, hands resting at her sides. This was always the hardest part. Not the danger. Not the decisions. The waiting. She thought of places she had been before. Places that looked nothing like this and exactly the same. Roads that turned wrong. Silence that warned too late. People who trusted her with their lives without ever knowing her name. She carried those memories carefully, like fragile tools. A message came through later that evening. Short, direct orders would change soon. A reassignment was likely. She acknowledged it and said nothing more. At sunset, the sky burned soft orange and red. People paused to watch, even if only for a moment. Beauty had a way of reminding them why they stayed human. She watched too. When night fell, the base lights flickered on again. Laughter drifted from one corner, music from another. Life, stubborn and real. She returned to her bunk and laid out her gear. Not much, everything clean. Everything ready before turning in. She opened her notebook and wrote a short list for the next day. Inventory, requests, maintenance, ordinary things. As she closed it, footsteps passed outside. Someone laughed. Someone else replied. She smiled, just slightly. They would remember her differently now. As the supply clerk who stayed calm, the one who knew what to do, the one who didn't panic, they would never know the full truth. And that was exactly how it was meant to be. Because people like her were not meant to stand out. They were meant to be there when everything fell apart and disappear once it held together again. The road would carry on. So would the work. Tomorrow, someone new would arrive. Another quiet figure. Another role easily misunderstood. She lay back and closed her eyes. Breathing slow and even, somewhere far away, plans would be made. Mistakes would be repeated. Underestimations would continue, and somewhere closer, if the worst happened again, she would stand up when needed. Not for recognition, not for stories, but because when the moment came, she was ready. That was who she was, and that was enough.